to tonight's Hope in the Darkness. Tonight we're going to be talking about the idea is, God, I'm crying to you. I'm crying to you for help. Can you please do something? You know, most of us have one thing we'd like to change in our life. I can't tell you how many female students I've talked to, and they've said, oh, I wish that, my nose was different, my ears were different, my thighs were different, whatever, and saying there's this one thing that I can't stand. Most of us have something in our life we'd like changed, maybe physically, but tonight we want to talk more about the things that are going on in our life. Why are things happening to me? Why can I not overcome this? Why do I have to deal with this? And so there's this idea of that we're trying to cry for hope. William Schultz tells the story of his 3-year-old daughter. He said one night they'd come in, she'd sit up to her room, time to get ready for bed. She was taking off her clothes. She was on the second floor. He was on the first floor. And all of a sudden he hears her cry out and say, Dad, please come and help me. Well, she's upstairs, he's downstairs, he's wanting to relax for just a second. So he yells up to Lauren, he says, hey, you know how to do it. Change yourself. A few minutes passed, and then you heard the little girl say, yes, but sometimes people need people anyway, even if they do know how. In the midst of our struggles, this idea of, am I struggling alone, or is somebody going to help me through this? You see, with a baby, they cry all the time, and really crying for a child is a sign of life. In fact, when we raised our children, I remember particularly when we came home with our first child, if our child was quiet for a while, Debbie'd say, hey, go see if he's still breathing. And I would go, and I would come back, and I'd say, I think he is. And she'd say, pinch him. And if he cries, then we know he's still all right. Really, crying is a sign of life. I don't mean just moaning and groaning about what goes on, but this idea of crying for help is a sign that we're still alive and we're still struggling. And while babies can cry everywhere, most adults cry alone in the dark, and nobody knows what's going on. And God says, pour out your tears to me. I want to know what's going on in the midst of our lives. You see, we keep asking these questions. Why, Lord? Why does this happen to me? And we struggle. Sometimes those struggles might be something really severe like ALS or MD or Alzheimer's or cancer or somebody's death, and we want to know why. Maybe we go back and we read the story of Job, or we look at Jesus' death and things that he goes through, but we still struggle with, why, Lord? Why are these things happening? Can I overcome? I love the story recently of the Ubelines, whose daughter was laying in a coma, and they said, no longer are we going to pray for her to come back to life. Why should we keep her from entering eternity where we've raised her to live all of her life? And so they said, we're going to let go. I don't know what's going on in your life, but I know every one of us in the times that we're dealing with right now are struggling with asking why. Maybe why a pandemic? Why did a loved one die? Why am I dealing with this? Why did I lose my job? Why the racial riots? Why whatever? And we're struggling to say, God, where are you in the midst of this? And we cry to help, and we're saying, God, please do something. Well, in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul kind of has that same thing. He says, hey, I got this thorn in the flesh, and there's all kinds of things about what it is, whether it was a look or speech impediment or on and on, the list goes, or even poor eyesight is one supposed. But here's the thing is, he says that this helped keep him humble. But that this thorn in the flesh, this terrible thing that was happening to him, didn't come from God. It came as a message from Satan. But God used it in the midst of his life. And he says that when I'm weak, that I'm really strong. In fact, Paul said, I prayed and I prayed for this to be taken away, but it's not taken away. He said 3 specific times I said, God, please, and God said no. And God's answer in verse 9 was, my grace is sufficient for you. You see, in weakness is Christ's power. Not that God necessarily delights in weakness, but he uses weakness to profound the world. In hardships and in difficulties, we wonder, where is this and why? And the answer is God is at work, and he's walking with us, and he's helping us overcome. In fact, in verse 10, it goes on to say, is when I am weak, then I am strong. That what God says to us in the midst of his word is he works through weakness and he helps us. And while the answer may not be the way that he wants, that God is still at work. I found that often in my weakness, people have come to know God. Often in my weakness, my children have seen me as human. Often in my weakness, My wife has seen me differently than she has before. Often in my weakness, the people in my church have seen me differently. That sometimes we want to put on this as I can't cry and I can't struggle, and the truth is in weakness, God is seen as even stronger. Right now, God has the ability to wash your tears away and to wipe your tears and to be with you. I think that God right now sits right where he is and says, let me wipe those tears. Let me put people in your lives. Maybe your challenge tonight is that you need to be somebody's there for somebody and help wipe their tears, because people need people, even if they know how. But God is with you, and God will be with you. We're going to hear from just a minute from Amy Smith. Amy and Richard have gone through a lot. They've gone through, right now they're in the midst of going through cancer with Richard. They lost their son. There's other things in their life that they've gone through, and every time God has been there, and God has been glorified, and God has picked them up, and God has given them strength for today. So I hope when you hear Amy tonight that you'll see how that God is still working in her life. So yeah, there is hope in the darkness, but sometimes all we can do is cry for help. And we say, God, would you please do something? But it's amazing to me that God often is there, but we only see him in the rearview mirror, that he is wiping our tears. He is loving us. He is taking care of us. God is doing something. And sometimes he may ask you to do something as his messenger for somebody else. So there is hope. Hang in there.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about the scriptures that you guys are talking about tonight. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 through 10. And some of this is one of my favorite hard time scriptures. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So this is God telling us that when we're weak and we're relying on him, that his power is shown, is evident, and it's made perfect. And I have experienced that a number of different times in my life, but most significantly in 2015 when my son was a Harding student, a senior, 6 weeks from graduating college, and went on a spring break mission trip and was involved in an automobile accident that ultimately took his life. And I really didn't think that I was going to survive that. Completely worst nightmare come true. But even before the accident, God was putting people in positions and aligning things to go in the way that he knew we needed them to be. So even though Nicholas lost his life, and that was not my prayer or anybody else's prayer that I knew and asked them to pray when I found out Nicholas had been involved in an accident, we were praying fervently that Nicholas would make it out alive. And that wasn't the case. But God was still in control, and God was still taking care of us before we ever knew that we needed to be taken care of in that way. And that's the hope that I found and learned and have been learning every day since then. It's been a little over 5 years, and there is something about each day where I can see God's providence or God's hand at work in either my life directly or in the lives of those around me. And that's what I think is the most important thing to give us hope, is that if you'll look for it, if you'll look for God's providence, if you'll look for his blessings, some days it's easier to see than others. Some days it's tremendously hard to see them, but it's there. God is showing you every day how much he loves you. He's showing us in significant and in less significant ways how much He loves us and cares about us and wants a relationship with us. He wants to hear from us. Just like you want to talk to your family or your friends or your significant other every day, God wants to hear from us every day. And it should be a running dialogue that we have with Him, because that gives us hope. That builds our faith. That's what we cling to in those moments of tragedy and fear. And there is so much of that going on in the world right now. Who knew that 2020 was going to be a progression of things that would happen to us individually, as a city, a state, a nation, and a world. So many people need God in their lives, and everybody needs hope. That's the message that we can send. That's the message that we can show with our lives, is that we are confident in God. We are confident in His love for us. We are confident in the fact that He made each and every one of us for a purpose on this planet. We all have a purpose that is God driven. And if we'll look for that and obey that and cultivate that and grow that, because as you grow, your purpose grows. That's the things that give me hope, that I hope will give you hope, and that will show hope to the world. And more than anything right now, the world needs hope, and they need God and His love. They need to feel that love. And the first step in that is hope. So I challenge you to look for God's providence or love or care in each and every day, because there's something about every day that He's going to show you that He loves you. And remember that even at your weakest point, if you're relying on God and you're finding that pathway that He has set for you, whether it be wide or narrow, He will give it to you. And that hope will come out in your life and show others the love that God has for you and He wants to give to those around you. I hope you have a great night, and I hope you've enjoyed your lesson. Thanks.